I were to give a final word of wisdom to anyone out there building a company, starting a company, I've mentored my fair share of startups. Don't do it alone. It's hard enough starting a company, and it's even harder trying to do it by yourself. You might be a business mind and you're thinking, oh, I can just, send it out to someone else and they'll build everything. Find a technical co-founder partner. You might be a technical person thinking, oh, this is just an engineering project. I can figure out the business later. Find a co-founder who understands the business side of things. That is the strength of Gym Rat Inc. That's the strength of our brand. That's the strength of our company, is the fact that it's both of us building this together.
All right, everybody, welcome to Start to Scale, the Founders Podcast by Gilder. Today we have an exciting guest. His name is Robie Webster Jr. He is also a Gilder member, former D1 athlete at Boston University in track and field, also the founder of Mtrc. But Robie, if you can give our guests kind of your background, what you're working on right now, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, no, an absolute pleasure for being here. Thank you and the entire team for just having me on today. A little bit about my background. Funny enough, as you mentioned, I'm a former Division I athlete. I ran track at Boston University. I was a hurdler, right? I usually get a lot of eyes raised when people realize I'm a hurdler, but I was a 110 hurdler primarily. And that was my thing. I loved it. It was an amazing experience. While at Boston University, I studied economics, right? So spent a lot of time looking at macro, micro, a little bit of everything. I tell people econ is psychology, sociology, and finance wrapped in one degree. So a little bit of everything. But post collegiate, I spent a few years training post collegiately for a track club up in the Boston area, and have been working ever since, right? Most of my career has been spent consulting, mostly in the energy industry, primarily, doing various things there. Um, but more recently went out to start my own business, right? Founding our brand, which is Mtrc. Mtrc is it's tied directly to my background as an athlete, right? Former Division I athlete, wanted to build something that could truly help people, right? People go in the gym regularly, and we can get into this later, right? But people go in the gym, they don't know what they're doing, they have questions about what to do, and it's too expensive or too confusing to figure it out, and so they stop going, right? And we're trying to solve that problem for, the millions of people out there who really do need a solution to hit their goals.
Wow. I love it. And there's a lot to unpack there. And the first thing that I want to talk about is kind of from the start. So
Yeah.
why did you start track and what made you get into hurdles? Or yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. It's actually, I don't tell this story very often, but I was kind of long and gangly. And I have an old coach who, if she sees this podcast, she'll know exactly what I'm talking about. She tells me all the time, I was in eighth grade, and she says it looks like I was jumping over refrigerators. Um, like literally, I'd run, and I'd just jump as high as I could to get over the thing. And I got to high school, and there's this concept of three stepping between hurdles, right? The 110 hurdles is really a rhythm race, right? It's 1, 2, 3, leg over, 1, 2, 3, right? It's a pretty standard rhythm race. And my freshman year, I remember I was in a pair of clunky Jordans. I couldn't afford running shoes, quite frankly, right? And I was in these pair of clunky Jordans, and I was like, "Hey, coach, just come look at me, come look at me." And I could just naturally three step. And he was like, "You're a hurdler. Fair enough." Right. And that was the birth of hurdling for me.
That's amazing. And I actually didn't, I did track and field for a little bit a while back, not crazy. I mean, I did middle school and then for one semester in high school. But
Yep. Yep.
I didn't realize that hurdling is a kind of a rhythm or a beat. It's 1, 2, 3, jump, 1, 2, 3, jump. Um,
Yes.
how did that kind of help with other parts and other aspects in your life, kind of getting in a rhythm, getting into a beat like hurdling?
Yeah, believe it or not, I think hurdling has a metaphor for everywhere in life, right? Um, the challenge with hurdling is it feels like a sprint because you really are sprinting, but you have to sprint in such a controlled way where you can hit your rhythm and really find your stride so that you can make it over the hurdle, right? And I think in life for me, like, a lot of people don't know, but I grew up, a little less advantaged than probably most. I track and field was really an outlet for me. Didn't grow up with a ton of money, didn't grow up, in the richest, nicest neighborhoods. Um, but it was an outlet, right? It was an opportunity for me, and it taught me how to slow down, how to control my pace and my rhythm and go at my own flow and my own pace, right? I tend to be kind of a very visionary leader, right? As I like to call myself sometimes. And what it requires of me, I think, is to be slow, controlled on my own pace and not let outside forces change how fast I need to go, right? Because the race will be over when it's over, right? So yeah.
And how do you mentioned kind of getting into that flow state. How do you get into that flow state?
Nowadays, honestly, it's 2 things. Number 1, the gym. My wife knows I am in the gym as often as I can be. If I'm not at the gym, I'm probably at home working out. I absolutely love working out. But the second thing, honestly, for me, it's honestly prayer. I live by prayer. I love it. It helps me just get calm, relaxed, kind of centered, find kind of who I am really, and it allows me to get into my flow every single day, right? So those are really my 2 go-tos when I'm thinking, how do I get in my flow? How do I get my day started? How do I get in my groove? Because I'm a multi-screen guy. I'm a former consultant, right? So I've
Right.
got multiple screens. When I'm going, I'm going, I'm locked in. And so it just helps me stay locked in.
It's awesome. So 2 things from that. One, what are kinda like your favorite workouts and or WODs? And then 2, what form of is it kind of meditation, journaling? Describe kind of like your form of prayer.
Yeah, yeah. Those are great questions. Favorite workout, right? That's a really good one, and it depends on the day. If I had to pick one, I'm not an upper body person, but I've started to love it much more lately. I spent a lot more time on my bench press. I don't know why. Maybe it's just a time of life sort of thing. Spent most of my life squatting, hanging power cleans, a lot of Olympic lifts, and I think I'm at the point now where I like the very stationary, singular movement, just bench press, Old Faithful. Um, just kind of regular. um, but to your question about prayer, right? What does prayer look like? I mean, for me, prayer is just about talking to God, right? I think it's the moment of meditation where I can sit quietly. For me, I'm a Christian, right? So I open my Bible, I pray, I spend time with God, I'll read. Um, and so it's just about really staying centered on who I am. I have a good friend of mine, good friend and mentor of mine. And it was probably years ago. And I remember I was struggling in work. And he's like, you just have to remember, dude, like life is going to happen around you, but you have to remember whose you are and who you are, right? It's like that's actually what matters every day, right? So it's easy to be a founder and feel, deflated because something didn't happen or you found a mistake somewhere that didn't go exactly the way you thought it would.
Mhm,
But even when those mistakes happen, it's a moment to reflect and say, "Hey, that's not who I am. That mistake is not who I am. I can still show up the very next day."
mhm. Oh, that's fantastic. And are there kind of any mantras that you follow or anything in specific that gives you energy when you wake up? Obviously besides your startup, but what are kind of some of those things that give you energy?
Yeah, I think it's an undervalued verse in scripture, but it's James 1:5, and it says, "If any of you lack wisdom, ask of God who gives to all liberally without reproach," right? And that's how I wake up every day, right? I wake up thinking, God, I just need more wisdom, right? I'm not the smartest person in the world. I don't know everything, right? But I feel like from wisdom, so many things flow out of that, right? And I don't know that we give enough value to wisdom, right? We can know what to do, what to say. We can know where to go, right? And when you're a leader, especially, wisdom is the difference between, a company that's going to go falling into the ground and one that's going to go skyrocketing to the moon, right? And so I really do like if you ask me my mantra, it's how do I have more wisdom when I see a problem, when I see a challenge, when I see something in front of me that I don't know how to handle, right? Because I've not seen everything, right? I physically can't. I don't think there's a single person out there who has, right? And so we'll come up against challenges and things, but it's just asking myself, and asking of God, how can I attain more wisdom in this moment?
That's amazing. So you're w- you're essentially a lifelong learner, and what does, the steps of being a lifelong learner, how can one who feels like they've maybe plateaued or maybe they've peaked, how can they continue to be a lifelong learner after they've
Oh
succeeded
man,
and had so much success?
learning is learning is it's the answer, right? I think lifelong learning is about being inquisitive. You have to be willing to ask the next question. It's one of the few things I know people give consultants a lot of flack because the question is, well, what do you actually do? Right. But I think the one skill set that makes the best consultant out there is the ability to ask the right question. Um, Not knowing everything is part of every job, but how can you ask the right question that makes it so you can? That's one of the few things I think that I probably do best anywhere is I can learn things rapidly, right? I don't know everything all at once, but I can ask three or four or five questions, and I think I usually get to a pretty good answer that helps me make a decision. And I think that's the piece about being a lifelong learner that more people should understand. How do I ask the right question to get to an answer as quickly as possible? Is that's really the game you're playing, right? It's again that measured speed, right? Go at your own pace, but how do you do the right thing to set you up so that you're going the speed you need to go to clear the barrier, right? Kind of back to that hurdling metaphor.
I love that hurdling metaphor. And kind of to segue back into your college life, being a D1 athlete. They say
Yes.
being a D1 athlete is one of the most difficult endeavors because it's super time consuming. Plus, you have finals to worry about. How did you balance out your life during that time?
Wow. Being a Division 1 athlete, yeah. Um, it takes a moment to even reflect sometimes on what life was like as an athlete. Um, it was fun and it was exhaustive all in the same time, right? I forget who it was. Maybe it was Richard Sherman. And he said something like, people don't understand as an athlete what your day is like, right? You wake up early in the morning, and for me, it was class from 8 a.m. till about 1 p.m., right? I get out of class and I might have, an hour, 2 hour break to eat lunch. Ate lunch, I go straight to practice. I'm in practice from 3 to 6. I get out of practice and I've got whatever time I can do to do homework because realistically, I've got to be in bed at 10. So I feel good enough to wake up and do it all over again. Right. And so that meant missing study abroad opportunities. Right. That meant, missing out opportunities to be in clubs. Right. That meant missing the study groups. That meant missing a lot of things in the collegiate experience, but I wouldn't trade it for anything, right? The things that being an athlete taught me, one of our foundational values for our company is grit matters. And I think that's the one thing that being an athlete teaches you. By and large, it's that you have to have grit to show up, to do the right things, to make sure that you're ready to compete when it's time to compete. Wouldn't trade that experience for absolutely anything.
And yeah, I think grit is one of those one of those words that kind of one of those adjectives that kind of separates, a person that because there's a lot of amazing athletes out there, but I think grit is one thing that separates, the top 1% of athletes to the other 99% of athletes that are amazing in physical shape, but maybe they don't have that grit. And so, how did you get? Um, how are you able to obtain that grit?
I think it comes back from when I was in high school. I was not the best athlete in the world, right? I wish I could say I was. I wish that was a rung I could hang my hat on, but I certainly was not. But I was good, right? I was good enough to go Division 1. And one of the things I used to tell people is, "Hey, I'm not the best out there, but I won't be beaten," right? And that was how I felt, right? It didn't matter who was on the track, didn't matter who was lined up next to me, right? It could be the fastest kid in the world, right? What mattered to me was winning. And that's how I show up now. That's how I showed up then. I think that's part of grit, right? It's that you want to win. Track and field has this sometimes sad thing where everyone's chasing the PR, right? Everyone's chasing, how can I run my fastest race, right? But part of grit is competing. It's looking to your left, looking to your right, and going, I want to win today, and I plan to do what it takes to win, right? And I think that's part of grit. It's how do you show up and think, hey, I'm going to win. I think I learned it in high school. It's, I remember my junior year, it's kind of side quest here a little bit. But junior year of high school, I was so in my state in Michigan. I grew up in Michigan. We had the 110 hurdles and the 300-meter hurdles. And I remember I was one person off of making the final my junior year for the 110 hurdles. And I had a chance later that day, probably about 5 or 6 hours later that day, to run the 300-meter hurdle. And I was in the very slowest heat, right? So you got to run it one time, not multiple rounds. And I was in the slowest heat. At the time I had run, again, I didn't even know what I had at the time, right? And I remember at the end, my coach being like, that was fantastic. But the very slowest heat, and I ran the fastest time in the state at that time. I
Wow.
ended up getting third place finish at my high school state meet, which is what put me on every college coach's radar. But it took grit to come back from not making the finals and what should have been my specialty, right? The thing that I was best prepared to do well in, to show up and do something just as good and perform later. That's grit, right? It's wanting to win even when you lose, right? I think that's the story of grit. That's my story behind grit.
I love that. And how did that translate into your career? Because
Yes. Yes. Yeah. My career has been interesting to say the least, right? Um, Being a consultant, I tell people sometimes, I'm like, I've been on the other side of some of the most difficult clients there are, right? These are people spending, millions of dollars on consulting studies, to then turn around and go spend billions on infrastructure, right? Not always the nicest people. And so as part of that, sometimes you lose, seriously. Um, I've had losses in my career, right? Where I've not been the smartest guy. I remember, there was a moment earlier in my career where I had a leader who was like, hey, you're just not up to snuff right now, right? You need to figure out how to get better. And I remember being so frustrated. What am I doing wrong? Why can't I figure it out? And it was a moment where I said, hey, there's some skill missing, clearly. There's something I don't know that I need to go figure out how to do. And that was what I did, right? I decided, hey, I'm going to take some courses. I'm going to learn some additional things so that I can upskill, so that I can be ready, right? And I think that, you asked about kind of my career and where grit shows up. Again, it's still moments like that, right? Taking a step back and recognizing this isn't the end. How do I go and do something, you know, to separate myself from where I was? How do I win? How do I win even when I've lost, right?
and kind of that transition period of going from like a D1 athlete and then going into your career, because a lot of D1 athletes, if they don't go pro, there's kind of that piece missing. I know it's kind of a bigger thing for football players, but I know track and field, a lot of folks kind of that are in a sport from the time they're in
Yes.
middle school all the way up until they're 22. How did you fill that gap once you started your career?
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of funny. I have an old coach, and I have so many funny coaches stories and so much life I feel like I've lived. I had a coach who coached in the SEC, and I'm not sure if this will get clipped up somewhere. I hope it doesn't look bad, but he used to say in track and field, you can't afford to not be able to read, right? Like you don't get that luxury in a sport like track and field, right? Track and field isn't a money sport. There's not a multi-million-dollar contract waiting on you at the other side of 2 or 4 years, however long you're in college. You have to be able to get an education. You have to do the right things because an overwhelming majority of track athletes who go to college don't go professional. And an overwhelming majority of the ones that do go professional don't make good enough money to, afford to just do track. I feel like it's an underknown thing. Whereas a professional, right? You see people in the Olympics every year. Most of them have regular jobs, right? They leave the Olympics with, the experience. They go to Tokyo, London, whatever part of the world it is, Paris, and then they go home and they might have a week to recoup. And then they go back to their day job, right? And so as an athlete, a Division 1 athlete, it was, I had to show up and do the things when, particularly summer, right? I had to take summer internships, right? It wasn't an option. It meant summer internships. It meant sometimes taking internships during the school year, right? That was probably one of the hardest things I did was I worked a lot during the school year, right? Every weekend when there wasn't a track meet, I was working, right? Every moment I could get where I was taking a work study job where, maybe after practice, I'd have 3 or 4 hours before I needed to go to sleep where I could go and sit in an office, right? And make sure people are swiping their ID cards, but I could do homework while doing it, right? Um, I had to take every single one of those opportunities because it was the only way I was going to make a difference when I graduated college. Otherwise, I would have been like that, right? Kind of wandering aimlessly. And I know it happens. It happens to so many of us. I have friends, I even have ex-teammates who it did happen to because they didn't think about the internships, the job placement, what happens after collegiate sports. And, it's a struggle. It truly is a struggle, honestly.
What would you kind of tell maybe some of those athletes now that are maybe transitioning into their career?
Honestly, I would say two things. Number one, take internships. I recognize football is harder, right? Because they are usually training in the summer, right? They're usually on campus in the summer, but you're not training all day, right? And most coaches have recognized that most of my kids are not going to be professionals. I can't put practice at 2 p.m. in the middle of the day when they could be taking an internship, right? But also, there's tons of companies out there that are flexible. I don't think people do enough of the hard work to go and find out where those companies are. There are tons of companies. I'm going to plug them briefly. I internship for a company called Athlete Network. Undervalued opportunities where they will help you find internships that are specifically geared towards athletes, where they'll say, hey, you have practiced these times a day. We will let you adapt your schedule to fit around whatever your practice schedule is so that you can continue being an athlete and get that valuable work experience. You have to take the internship opportunities. The second thing, though, and I don't think people give athletes enough credit for this, is you have to remember to show up in your classes, not just physically, but mentally. College is one of those things where it can be so hard for some and yet so easy for others. And some people are like, I'm just showing up to get the degree to have the paper on the wall. But it's really about showing up in the class. I tell a story. I was not a homework person. I tell people today, I don't know that I could go back and get an MBA because I truly was not a homework person. I despised homework with everything in me. Um, but the difference maker was that when I was in class, I was willing to ask the questions. I sat in the front of the room, right? I took the notes and made sure that I paid attention because even if I wasn't, the greatest homework person in the world, I knew the content that helped me kind of, get through the rest of my life and my career. So,
So yeah, you mentioned that you can learn fast. What are kind of the methods that you do to learn and comprehend things fast, especially in your career as you're kind of, you did consulting, you have to learn right on the spot.
yes,
What are kind of ways
yes.
that you learn?
Break things down into tangible. Stop seeing the world so big and expansive. Break things down into tangibles. Break things down into organized steps. Um, every project I've been on, every role I've had, they're clear tangibles, right? For every single thing, right? Um, I mean, it's funny because again, another track metaphor, right? There's so many hurdles. There's space in between. Things can be broke. It's always bite sized, right? I think the challenge is, you know, a big project comes, there are all these pieces, and hey, we want this and that, and this piece and that piece. And it's like, okay, what do you actually want, right? Let's ask that question, right? You want all of these hundreds of things. What matters, right? Okay, these three things matter. Got it, right? So you want me to tell you X, Y, and Z. Great. All the other things are nice to have supporting evidence. Okay, so my job is to give you, those three answers as crisply, and cleanly as possible. Frame. Then you start asking questions about each one. Okay, so you want this. What if it looked like this? What if it had that? What if it didn't have this, right? And it's understanding how to take everything and turn it into bite-sized pieces because I think that at least for me, my brain is very good at taking in information and going, okay, I just took in a ton of stuff, distill that rapidly. break it into things that you understand, right? Someone starts talking about, I tell people all the time, I moonlight as an engineer, not because I'm an engineer and I know engineering schematics and everything else. No, but I understand that that's how engineers think, which is I think what people learn when they go and get engineering degrees. It's how do I take all of this information and go chunk, 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 right? And that information and that way of processing, just I think that's the difference between seeing everything and being scatterbrained and running around and confused versus going, yeah, throw whatever you have at me, right? Whatever challenge, new, old, I can take learned experiences, right? Which is always a valuable thing. Learned experience, breaking things down, creating an output. That's it.
I love it. And another thing, why did you study economics at Boston University?
Honestly, this is kind of a cheating, maybe a cheating answer, but I loved econ in high school. Took regular econ my junior year. I think my junior year, I think it was gonna go be like an NCIS, investigator. But I was like, this sounds great, right? So my seniors, I'm gonna figure this out. I took AP Econ and I took criminal. I think it was like a criminology course or something like that, or forensic science, something like that. Um, and did not like forensic science. I was like, this is boring. I don't really care how the blood splatter moved on the. That's not intriguing. But took AP Econ and passed both AP Econ tests. AP Econ Micro and Macro and got college credit. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do this because I have college credits going towards that discipline and it's easy. I just got it, right? Econ is one of those things where you either get it or you don't for a lot of people. It's not like finance where you can go and study, I study this formula, this piece goes here, that goes there. Econ is very conceptual, right? It's information, kind of to my point, information coming in from all over the place and you either understand how to distill it into bite-sized chunks or you don't. And my brain just did, right? And so it was just easy choice for me, honestly.
That
I
makes
got to get it was frankly I got to get a degree and be an athlete and not be overwhelmingly stressed like some of my friends who were doing like biomechanical engineering and crazy stuff like
right.
that.
No, that makes sense. And so now transitioning, so from consulting to now metric, how
Yes.
I guess with an econ major, how were you able to kind of turn that into an engineering kind of mindset to build a physical workout product?
Yeah, yeah. It's really funny. Number one, I have an amazing co-founder, right? That's the starting point, right? I'm big on people should not try to start companies by themselves. I have stories to tell you on why so much there, right? So that's probably first and foremost. I have a really good co-founder who's very good in the technical space. Um, but econ into starting my own company. Funny enough, I don't know that econ is what I would call the primary driver behind how I ended up doing what I'm doing. Um, it's a culmination of a lot of things. I think it's number one, the fact that I'm a former athlete, right? I think if people are going to sell something, out there, they should feel confident in whatever it is. I think that makes you the greatest salesman, right? You can talk about it like no one's business, and I just know that I can talk about my product, right? Um, but the second thing is all of my experiences, right, in my career. I spent time doing supply chain, finance, actual strategy work, right? Capital raising, a lot of just, team management, project management, things like that, all in the energy space, which required me to understand civil engineering, electrical engineering, right? Take your pick. I kind of had to learn a little bit of all of it. And in this space, that's really what it's been, right? Kind of lifelong learner. I've had to learn a lot about consumer electronics, very different from looking at high voltage lines running across people's power grids, versus looking at, a very small bite-sized device and going, okay, how do my, electronics run? How do my resistors operate, right? Where's my battery connecting, et cetera, and just learning it, right? That's really what it came down to is how fast can I learn the information in front of me? And that's really what it's been. It's been sprinting at the speed of light to learn.
And what, I guess, gave you that maybe epiphany to transition from like a stable kind of career job into becoming an entrepreneur?
Oh man, don't get me started. That is probably one of the toughest decisions I think anyone can ever make. Going from being frankly, a nice, well-paid consultant. I won't give you the numbers, but people can probably Google, right? To a startup founder where things are as high risk as it gets. In the consumer space at that, right? Which is even much riskier than any kind of startup you can make. Um, I think it was two things, right? I think number one, as a consultant, I began to realize that all of the insights and learnings that I had that I gathered to support clients and all of these various things was fantastic. But I began to understand, hey, I think I could have so much more value inside of a business versus consulting for it. And so I actually tried to make a jump, but before I actually went out completely on metric, I made a jump into a business where I was like, okay, here's my chance to maybe have a bigger impact. And I began to realize very quickly that I had so much to offer with what I knew in my own brain and the capabilities that I had, that weren't being fully leveraged, right? Just that's the way corporate America works, right? You have skill, you have talent, but the way corporate America works is everyone gets put in a finite box, right? And you play the role in that box. And it became a moment where I realized, no, I have so much more to offer. I have so much more insight. I have, for me, it felt like a moment where it was, I have something more to offer than, the corporate level insights. And funny enough, we talk about it on our social media. I didn't start the original idea for Metric. It was my co-founder, David. He had the original idea. Metric was a fitness tracker that, measured when things moved up and down, right?
Mhm.
And I saw his idea and I said, hey, man, there's so much more on this. I took what I knew about consulting, right? What do people really want in consulting, right? They don't just want the answer, right? They want you to take all of the context that they have. They want you to take the internal context, the external context, and give them something tailored to them. That is the key in consulting. You can do that with any product. And so what we did was I said, hey, we have an opportunity to take insight that's gathered in just a little, here's metric, right? This little tiny, very, very tiny thing, right? It's small, smaller than the size of my iPhone, right? The idea is we're going to capture so much data. Why don't we personalize that to people? Why don't we use that to actually help people hit their goal versus just saying, hey, we counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for you. That, I don't know, that's just, that's the piece that I think, when I think about the corporate world, my transition of being is a founder, it's adding the value that I knew I could add from my consulting work, from my strategy work, from my way of thinking and my ability to learn all the time to an actual business versus to a project, right?
And who specifically is Metric for? I know that
Yeah.
obviously I would definitely use it. I do CrossFit, I like weightlifting. I like being more tailored with everything that I do. But who would you say Metric is for?
I'm going to answer your question in two ways. The art of answering a question is always a thing, but I'm going to answer it in two ways, right? I'm going to answer with who I think is going to pick it up first, right? Metric really, in its inception, I do think the person who really cares about being in the gym is the person who Metric is designed for initially. Why? Because we recognize that the people who care about the gym are the people who want to understand what they're doing in the gym, how they're doing it, etc. But Metric is being designed for everyone, right? I think this is the challenge. I get to like the challenge of fitness, right? There's so much data out there that says that, thousands, millions of people will go pick up a gym membership in January, right? Where in late October, in 2 months, gyms will be packed, right? All over the world, gyms will be packed. And within 6 months, all those people who signed up in January, more than 50% of them are going to stop going to the gym. They're going to stop working out. They're going to say, this was too hard and I don't want to do it. And why? Because they don't know what to do, right? They go in there and they just move some things around. They don't know what they're doing, right? If they do know what they're doing, they don't have the time, right? Between kids, family, parents, they may be taking care of work, schedule, everything else. They simply don't have the time. And then the solution is a trainer, right? And I love trainers, nothing against trainers, but the average person can't afford a trainer, right? In the United States, it's $600 a month for a personal trainer, which is kind of ridiculous, right? And so when we think about Metric and who it was designed for, truly, it's for any and everyone who wants to be in the gym, right? If you're someone who says, I want to get in the gym on January, we want to be there. If you're someone who says, I want to be there in May, April, whatever, because the concept, the way we understand it, and the way I understand it is the reason or the largest reason people leave the gym 6 months, however many months it may be, is because they aren't seeing the progress they want to see. They aren't actually hitting the goals they want to hit. They aren't actually meeting the goals, whatever they set out to do. I wanted to lose 20 pounds. And they get in there and they're like, I don't actually know how to lose 20 pounds. And I'm scared to talk to the trainer because he's going to sell me a package. Right. And I don't have friends who work out because all my friends are in a lifestyle that I was in before I decided I wanted to be fit. And then they realize I don't have the time to keep up, right? And then before you know it, these things stack, 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 and they go, this is too much, I'm out, right? Metric is designed for the people who just want to get in the gym, want to be fit, want to attain those goals, because we think that that's the highest value for the person, right? It's how to be healthy every single day.
I love that. And so you mentioned, average trainer is $600 a month. What can we get from Metric? Because I know that it's
Yes,
what a couple bucks a month, and you get all this data and analytics, and you get tailored workouts.
yes,
What exactly
yes.
do we get with Metric?
Yeah, so Metric provides a handful of things, right? And physically, Metric is what we're calling the personal trainer in your pocket, right? Truly, we believe the concept is a personal trainer in your pocket. The idea is meant to be an affordable, accessible personal trainer to the every person, right? Imagine you go into the gym and you go, I don't know what to do. But instead you open your Metric app right on your phone and you've got your Metric device, right? You walk in and you say, I don't know what to do. Okay, I've got this device, I've got my application, and I hit one button. Whoop, Metric turns on, right? Metric goes on your weight stat, your barbell, whatever you're using to work out. And as you're lifting, I'm doing bench press, right? I talk about my favorite lift is bench press, right? Metric knows exactly how many bench presses I did, how many sets I did, how many reps I did, and also how well I did them, right? How well I did them is the piece that personal trainers even can't get to, right? They can see it, right? But they can't feel what your muscles are going through, right? They can't feel the imbalance maybe in your hands. They can't feel the tempo at which you're going, right? Our device can, right? So as you're moving up and down, if you're struggling, our device knows that you're struggling and it says, hey, that isn't the weight based on your goal, right? Your goal is to lose 20 pounds, right? This is how you should be lifting. These are the weights you should be lifting for you. This is how much you should be running for you. This is how you get to that goal. And it's backed by tons and tons of knowledge, right? I'm not just an athlete, I'm a former coach. I've read many of books on physical training, on personal training. I've trained many people, right? We are backed by, the insight and the information that says, you want to go in the gym and do whatever it is you want to do. You maybe want to bodybuild, you want to lose weight, you want to tone, right? Whatever that may be for you. And we say, okay, fantastic. Here's your lift workout. Here's your warm up, right? Such an undervalued piece of a workout. Here's your cool down, right? Here's the stretches you should be doing to keep and maintain that flexibility as you're gaining or losing that muscle. Here's the cardio you should be doing, right? That's the vision we have. Is like literally you go into a gym, hotel, home gym, commercial gym, travel gym, Cancun, London, pick wherever you are around the world. This little device goes with you into that gym and it's literally your personal trainer, right? That's really the vision for Metric and how people use it.
I also think that it could be really applicable for PT, like physical therapy. I know I dislocated this shoulder. I've broken this collarbone, the same left one, and
Yep.
there's
Yep.
like a
Yep.
balance when I lift. And so even when I'm doing like bench presses or clean and jerk, sometimes I feel like overhead.
Yep.
This side. So I'm assuming that there's probably ways that Metric could tell me, hey, like maybe Tiger, you should start focusing more on these specific lifts to balance out, your body more, like things like that.
So the very funny thing about what David and I have talked about, and so I guess you'll get a little bit of exclusive here. It's something we talk about in our pitch. It's something that, we know and we've talked to with investors for sure is that we're actually in the process. We have a machine learning algorithm, right? So that's really what's behind metric, right? Is machine learning. Where we're going is a self-developed in-house SLM, right? Small language model, not a big LLM. We're not trying to be generative AI and solve all the problems in the. We have a very specific focus. We have a very specific application where we believe that understanding the insights for your body tailored to you, if we layer that on with a live SLM, exactly. What you're saying is 1,000,000% true, right? And so where we see the vision for Metric is people pick it up and they see it as a personal trainer. But what if Metric wasn't just your personal trainer, right? What if it was your dietitian? What if it was your physical therapist? What if it got to a point where it could say, "Hey, you're going to the gym and we know so much about your routine, about your diet, about what you're eating, about what we planned and recommended for you to be doing based on your goals." Yeah, absolutely. You hurt your shoulder today? Well, here's the lifts you probably shouldn't be doing. Here's what you should do. And now we're going to recalibrate your entire workout for you, right? That's the vision we absolutely see for Metric, right? So you hit the nail on the head with that.
And another thing, just I know a lot of folks are getting more into blood work. I know there's a company called like Wild Health. Would you ever consider adding like a feature like blood work into this to get it more tailored towards like the person too?
So, naturally the way we see Metric is in a couple things, right? Metric does a lot of things. Metric, how do I put this? Metric is not today as we envision it a medical device, right? And so we do not see ourselves being the host of people's medical blood draw level data. However, because we believe in technology and the power of technology, we think there is an IoT or information of things solution here for Metric, right? Where you have your wearable or you have your insight from your doctor's office, whatever that may be, all this integrated data, right, is all out there, right? You've got your blood draws, your charts, your heart rate monitor that you might wear, whatever that may be. Metric can bring all of that data in and then tell you again, personalized to you, this is what we know about you as an individual. We aren't going to do blood draws, right? We're not going there, right? We're not medical providers, but we can and we'll be able to say, hey, because we know about you at an individual level from all of the other things and places in your life where you're collecting biometric specific data about yourself, we can then take all of that and again tailor it to you. Absolutely. That is absolutely on the roadmap for Metric. Absolutely.
That's amazing, Robbie. I'm super excited with Metric, and if anyone wants to follow kind of your journey with it, what's a good way to kind of follow Metric? I know you have some social
Yes.
media things like that. I can
Yes.
put in the show
Yes.
notes.
Yes. I would definitely say people should follow us on Instagram, metric.app at metric.app. If you're on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn, right? Feel free to connect with us, engage with us. We are posting content. People will be getting you guys saw a sneak preview of it, but people will be getting real live, 3D visuals of what Metric looks like on our social media very soon, right? We are so excited to be able to share this with the world in the very near future and talk more about what we're doing. So absolutely follow us on social media on Instagram.
Fantastic. I'll share that in the show notes. Roby, is there any other words of wisdom or advice that you'd like to share with our guests? I'm sorry, you still there? Can you hear me? Roby, can you hear me?
I had a connection issue there.
Oh, there's a connection issue. Okay. Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? I can edit all this part too. Let me see.
We might have lost connection there, but we made it most of the way through. Let's see if that works. There we go. I can hear you. Hello?
Okay, cool. There you are.
There we go. I lost
Just have
connection
one
for a moment.
more. Oh yeah. No worries. I can edit that part out, so it'll look clean on the including this part. It'll look clean at the end. But
Okay.
all right. So getting back into it, any final words of wisdom or advice you'd like to share to our listeners?
Yeah. I think that the power of Metric really is in the fact that David and I are here, right? And if I were to give a final word of wisdom to anyone out there building a company, starting a company, I've mentored my fair share of startups. Um, don't do it alone. Seriously. It's hard enough starting a company and it's even harder trying to do it by yourself, right? You might be a business mind and you're thinking, oh, I can just, send it out to someone else and they'll build everything. Don't find a technical co-founder partner. You might be a technical person thinking, oh, this is just an engineering project. I can figure out the business later. Find a co-founder who understands the business side of things. That is the strength, I think, of Gymrat Inc. That's the strength of our brand. That's the strength of our company, is the fact that it's both of us building this together. And I think that's the entire piece of businesses. People think they can do it by themselves. Businesses are better together. That's one thing we've learned. Community together with other people, that's the way to do things. And so that's my parting wisdom for anyone out there.
Awesome. I couldn't agree more. We couldn't do this on our own. It's kind of actually a superpower to ask for help too, I think. Not enough people ask for
Yeah,
help. So I couldn't agree more with those words of wisdom and advice. And Roby, I really appreciate you being a guest on our Start to Scale podcast, the Founders
absolutely.
Podcast by
Absolutely.
Gilder. Um, and thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Take care, man.